Welcome to the BuildFire workshop, where we learn how to build new features on the BuildFire platform. Today we're going to talk about what's the difference between a plugin and a feature. So you hear a lot about plugins in the BuildFire platform, and sometimes they're referred to as features, and then there are core features. And the purpose of this video is to sort of explain the nomenclature and you as a developer, what is it that you have access to, what is completely in your control, and what is partially in your control through configuration. So if you go into your feature set and you go into the marketplace, so when you look in the marketplace and see any one of these features, each one of these features is what we call technically a plugin. Now, the reason why we don't call them plugins, we actually used to in the BuildFire platform, is because that seemed a little bit too technical for people, so we just called them features. But what you sometimes hear us refer to as core features are things like the branding or the side menu, footer menu, things that are outside of the marketplace. The simplest way to look at it is if it's in the marketplace, it's a plugin. If it's outside of the marketplace, then that's a core feature. Now, if you go to your home screen, this is a plugin that just so happens to be part of your home screen. Now, the main components of a plugin, for those of you who have developed plugins know this very well, but for those of you just dabbling, is what we call the control side of the plugin and the widget side of the plugin. There are other components like services and widget services and so on, but generally speaking, there are two major sides. The control side, what lives in the control panel, and the widget side, what lives on the app itself. Now, within these, there's multiple layers. So you'll see these tabs, but the simplest way we can explain is assume there's an iframe right underneath that border that goes to your plugin control/content/index.html and loads your code up here. Now I say an iframe because technically if you view code, it is an iframe. However, I put a big fat asterisk next to it because depending on the environment, it could be sandboxed, and certain things that you could usually do with iframes we're not allowing you to do. But for this purpose of this video, just assume it's an iframe and that you just are injecting your page in here. Now, in that model, it allows it to be extremely modular. So let's say we wrote the control panel a long time ago in Angular and you wanted to use React. Because it's framed in, you're loading everything in your own environment. It looks like the same environment, but it actually isn't. It's just framed within the control panel. And again, just below that content line. Everything above here is sort of templated in for you. The design is actually a separate page that loads, or a separate screen, if you will, in your plugin control/design/index.html, and you also have settings, which is another core one. The reason why we say core is because they're pre-templated to look and feel exactly the same way. You can have custom tabs outside of content, design, and settings. This particular one doesn't have settings. That'll load up here towards the end, and you can make as many as you want and name them anything you want. Security, tagging, purchases, and analytics, again, depending on the tier of app that you have, these may expand or contract. These are just things that BuildFire makes it easier for you. So just the fact that this has security and it says require login, well, yes, in your plugin, you can write code that says, I'm not going to work if you're not logged in. Or you could just turn this on. Now, the reason why you have both options is some plugins, it just doesn't work if you're not logged in. I need a profile to link this data to. And so the plugin ensures this. Either in your plugin.json, you say requires login true, or you write your own code. If somebody's not logged in, say, sorry, you must be logged in, and force them to log in. Now, other plugins, it's more of a contextual thing. Let's say the content in here requires you to be logged in. It requires you to be logged in and have the tag manager. And so BuildFire does all this for you. and so that you could utilize that without having to develop everything on your own. But going back to the content portion here, you can see that this can be anything. It's HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So anything you want to use, you can. Now we prefer that you adhere to the style guide of BuildFire and just the methods and the controls and components that are available to you. However, technically you can make it do anything that you want. Whether it's bootstrap design, material design, it's not a technical limitation. It's just so that it's very comprehensive. That's not the right word. It's so that it doesn't seem native to the platform. Now, going to the widget side, the widget can be loaded in many different ways. The first way that you look at is what we call the launcher or the home plugin. Right here we call the plugin the home screen here. However, in some documentation you see it referred to as the launcher. Now think of this as an iframe as well. Again, we're thinking web here, but on phone it's slightly different, and Android versus iOS is completely different. For those of you who have a background in Cordova, you sort of understand that yes, while you can refer them to as web views and frames, they're not exactly the same. Especially that BuildFire does not load anything from the web. All the content is actually on the phone, or at least the source for each screen. And as you look at this is the home screen, which means it's constantly loaded here. Any additional plugin loaded from the side menu or from, let's say this is a folder and it navigates to, it's actually loaded on top of the home. So if I were to remove this, if I were to inspect this and remove it, you'll see that the launcher actually exists behind it. And if I remove this, and we'll see if you could catch that, it's already loaded. It didn't reload. It didn't navigate away. All we do is throw an additional screen on top. Right? So this is where we sometimes refer to it as the plugin or the widget on top. But the truth of the matter is they're all plugins and widgets. One is the launcher and one is the overlay. There's a third one, which is widget services, and think of this as daemons or Windows services or just code that runs in the app in the background that doesn't have a visual component to it. It's just running. So if on the widget side of your plugin you're running something that's just let's say monitoring your GPS location, and if you enter in some geo zone, it wants to give you an alert. So I want that to continue to work whether I'm in my plugin or not. So if I leave, I go to launch and I go to a gallery or any other plugin in the BuildFire marketplace, I want that code to constantly run. So you put that in the widget services side of things. So looking at some code now, just as an analog, you could see the control side has content and index.html. In this particular one, I don't have design or settings, or otherwise you'd see a folder called design as a sister to content and settings. I just deleted that, and proof of that is if I go to the plugin JSON, you could see I have turned them off and I don't have any custom tabs as well. Now, if you look at the index.html, it is just a simple meta tag for pinching. It loads a BuildFire namespace, has a little bit of styling just to make this look good. It's just HTML and CSS. There's some slight caveats like always make sure that your paths are relative, because moving between your development environment, the control panel, iOS, Android, phones, tablets, PWAs, and the such, you're dealing with different file systems and different locations. And so as long as you keep your path relative and not absolute, it should work just fine. But this should all seem just normal JavaScript, HTML, and CSS to you. If you wanted to use React, you can port over React. If you wanted to use Vue, Angular, Ember, whatever you want, as long as it's JavaScript, it should work just fine. For those of you who work with PHP, PHP renders on the server. While you can communicate with a PHP API, while you can navigate to a PHP page, you can't write PHP here because this is serverless. This is running on the device. On the widget side, you can see that I have an index.html. Here I'm referencing some JavaScript that's local, but it's web technologies like you know it. We just force some file structures on you so that we know what part is the control. Again, the control and the widget, the control and the widget. And when you run this in the plugin tester, you have the same analogy. The plugin JSON, think of it as the package JSON. This is what tells the environment that you're in, who's the author, what's the plugin name, description, as well as the certain icons that you may be loading. This all can be easily viewed when you go to features and marketplace. So in here, the name of the plugin, who's the developer, the description. In here, you could also add in a carousel and GIFs and videos with more advanced plugin JSON settings. You could actually set this up for purchase on either a single purchase or subscription in the development portal. But I hope this helps better explain what is a plugin versus a core feature. Again, whenever you're in doubt, just go to the marketplace. If you can find that feature in the marketplace, and it's a plugin. Otherwise, it's a core feature that you may have a BuildFire.js API that you can configure and communicate with, but you don't have full control over. A good example of that, again, is the side menu. You can affect the side menu, you just can't take full control over it. And a big part of that is anything that's shared, anything that may bleed into another feature or another component or another plugin. That's where we isolate it and say go through an API to communicate with it. If it's inside your plugin, you're the master of your plugin, you can make it do anything you want it to do. We have a massive MBAS, which is just backend services, so you don't have to deal with setting up servers, databases, APIs, load balancers, firewalls, and all that mess. It's a serverless architecture for you, so we could save your data, save your analytics, your push notifications, and so on. But the idea is we provide these options to you. They are not forced upon you. If you want to integrate with any third-party API or your custom proprietary API, you can absolutely do that. So again, I hope this explains what a plugin is and it better illustrates what portions you have access to and what portions you do not. I'm excited to see what you guys will build. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up to date with our latest content. If you do so, you'll also be entered into a raffle where you can win some BuildFire merchandise. Thanks for watching.